The average Canadian spends more than they earn, and unfortunately, that's a trend that seems to be increasing and not decreasing. Well, is there a way to get out of debt? Is there a way perhaps to prevent from going into debt to begin with? Today's guest has some advice on this. Kent Prestage has years of experience as a CFO. He is the owner of Prestage Consulting and also an instructor at Reeves College here in Lethbridge, Alberta. Welcome to Bridge City News, Kent.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here, and it's an important topic that needs to be discussed. Maybe not one of the easy conversations to have. You probably create a lot of butterflies in people's lives, but I was recently reading that Canadian household debt to income ratio is about 184.5%. Can you explain what this means and describe how badly in debt are we?
Well, this is a real problem in Canada, and it's been getting worse for years and years and years. And what it means is that for every dollar of income that the average Canadian has, they have $1.84 worth of debt. So when you multiply that out, the average Canadian is in what we would consider pretty sad shape. For example, in the United States, this same number was 1 to 175, and that triggered the 2008 stock market crash that they experienced in the United States. And what happened down there is people were carrying more debt than they could afford, and defaults on mortgages led to the near collapse of the US economy, if you remember 2008.
Yeah. Now, would the Canadian government or the Canadian economy be able to sustain something like that?
Well, what I'm really concerned about as we look into the future here is that we would have a real serious problem. We have a different banking system than the United States has, and our banking requirements are a little bit more stringent than they were in the United States. But it doesn't get over the fact that we've had some serious increases in the last little while in inflation. That's driven the Bank of Canada to raise the interest rates. And people that were paying 2% on a variable rate mortgage are now going to be paying 4 or 5, maybe even more. And that is going to put a lot of stress on the market. And the problem is most of those people haven't renewed yet. So our problem is not over. A lot of people think, oh, we're going to lower the interest rate here right away, so the problem is over. But it's not, because a lot of people with 5-year term mortgages, they're going to come renewing in the next few years here, and they're going to have a substantial shock to their budgets.
Right. So are there any thoughts on why Canadians might have a mindset that causes us to spend far more beyond our means, or is it just the frog in the pot of boiling water scenario?
Well, it's a little bit of both. As I go back and I look at, I graduated from high school in the 1970s, and I go back and I look at that. We all wanted to have the same standard of living as our parents. Our parents had nice houses, nice cars, nice furniture. And so we wanted that. The problem was we weren't willing to wait the 20 years that our parents worked to achieve that. So a lot of us, especially in the early 70s, debt became very easy to acquire. That was kind of the point in time when credit cards became widely available, widely accepted. The early 70s. And, and now, of course, we also add to this easy debt that we've been allowed to accumulate. We add to that the inflation cycle that's happened again. But by the way, that inflation cycle is not new. In the 70s, we had the same thing happen. In fact, I would suggest even to a far deeper circumstance. I remember mortgages that were 18% interest. If you could you imagine 18% mortgage interest now at $400,000, $500,000 homes? It would just be a catastrophe.
It certainly would. I have another question then about debt. Of course, one of the things that we see is the shops that do payday loans. Is that kind of that next step as people are kind of going through that debt funnel, so to speak?
Oh, I have real bad feelings about payday loan. In fact, I would caution anybody that's watching today, if they are taking out loans from payday loans or those type of companies, I kind of call them legal loan sharks. The interest rates are outrageous. The fees are even more so outrageous. And I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. Credit cards are bad. Payday loans are even worse when it comes to the type of debt that we structure. So I caution people to stay away from payday loans for sure.
Right. Now, as people find themselves in this debt vortex, is there a first step that you would recommend for people climbing out of debt?
Well, absolutely. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to find out what you're spending. In all honesty, a lot of people don't know what they're spending. I'm going to put it this way: they see the trees, the individual bills, but they don't see the forest, the total debt load that they're carrying compared to the income that they're carrying. So the first step is to find out what you're actually indebted to, what your totals come to, rather than just looking at individual bills.
That makes a lot of sense. I had recently heard that Canadians on average could be $21,000 in credit card debt. Have you heard that similar kind of number?
Actually, I'd tell you that the number's probably worse. I know of people who have one or two, three credit cards maxed out to $30,000 a piece. And when you start talking $30,000 on a credit card that's charging 24% interest, that's outrageous. In fact, one time I did a study for myself, and I did a spreadsheet to find out how long it would take to pay off a credit card, if indeed you just paid the minimum payment every month. Now, the minimum payment in Canada is 3% of the balance. So, say you had $5,000 on your credit card, 3% is your minimum payment, but 2% per month is the interest that's being added to it. So I believe and I can't remember exactly, but basically, if you got into debt in your 20s, you'd still be paying off that credit card in your 60s.
Wow.
And that's just because you're only making the minimum payment.
Right. So one really has to attack that principal amount.
Absolutely. That is definitely the key.
So my question then for you is, how does one pick from, let's say, 4 or 5 debt sources, which one gets that attack against the principal first?
Well, there's a couple of different strategies that you can use to accomplish that. The first strategy, the one that it worked for me, it's the way I did it. I took the smallest bill that I had. Maybe it was $1,000. I can't remember. I've been out of debt for quite a while now, but I took the smallest debt that I had and I concentrated on paying it off. Every penny I had, I put on that debt. As soon as that debt was paid off, then I took the payment that I was using to pay it, I combined that with the payment for my next smallest debt, paid that off. When that was paid off, I took the payments from all three now and started paying on the next smallest debt. Now, a variant on that same one, and the reason I picked smallest is because you know what, you can clean it up quickly. And you know what, when you're starting to dig out a debt, you're not going to be spending a lot of money, so it's pretty tough. You know, you're gonna so pick something that's going to give you a hey, I got out of debt on that one, so I took the small one. Another strategy that can be very similar to that is to go after the bill that's got the highest interest rate on it and pay it off first. But typically, that tends to be your credit card debt. And a lot of people, like I just said, there are people that have $30,000 on a credit card. And that is not a small debt to pay off. And it's going to take some serious hard work to do that.
Now, speaking of hard work, interest, of course, seems predatory and is such a challenge once we're down that road. Can you speak to how we need to maybe change the way we're living and viewing money that would actually help us to prioritize the payoff of debt?
Well, I mean, what happened to me is I started looking at my debt. I actually sat down, figured out what I owed, and I said, this isn't viable. I have to fix this. I have to change it. So you have to have a paradigm shift. You have to decide that I'm going to live below my means while I pay off the debt so that I can live above my means or equal to my means after the debt is gone. So it does take a paradigm shift or a mind changing, and it takes a word that everybody hates. It's called discipline. You have to discipline yourself to not go out and spend money.
Right. Well, and it's so easy to get attracted by the shiny objects, and it's easier to eat out, and it's easier to just go and do this instead of look for the thing. I know I have it somewhere. Can you talk maybe about some simple tasks that we could do around the house that would actually help us to live below our means?
Well, certainly if you can do repairs. Now, I have to admit, not everybody's handy. I grew up doing repairs and learning how to do woodwork and all those other things. So, for example, around my house, if the tap's leaking, I'm going to fix it. I'm not going to call in a plumber to fix that. If something's broken, I'm going to try and fix it. I'm not going to pay for a service that I can do myself. Well, in my case, I do all my own taxes, but again, that's part of my job too. But I mean, anything that you can do that can, save some money along the way. I used to have a little problem with my furnace that the sensor would get dirty on it, and then it wouldn't light, right? The fire wouldn't come on. So I paid the repairman once to come out and he showed me how to fix it, and I fix it myself now. So anything that you can do to reduce your expenses is going to give you more money to turn around and pay down that debt. I mean, something as simple as not buying a coffee every morning on the way to work. A coffee by itself, about $2 a cup for a cup of coffee, $10 a week, $40 a month, right? That's $40 a month that you could be using to pay down some debt. So again, you can make little lifestyle changes that can make huge changes in your finances.
Right. And it's good to track those things too, because if we can measure something, we can control something.
That's the whole thing. Going back to my original statement there, that a lot of people don't even know what they're spending. They don't know what their debts are. And without knowing what their debts are, that puts them into a position where they spend because they just don't know. And that's a horrible situation. If you know, you're going to say, no, you know what? I can make coffee at home instead of buy it on the way to work, right?
Exactly. Now, we often hear about debt consolidation loans. It seems at first glance that this might be a wise plan to go to your bank and ask to amalgamate all of your debts. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I hate to disagree. It can be, if it's done right, it can relieve some of the interest burden that you might be carrying. But here's the problem with debt consolidation loans. You go to the bank, you might have 5 or 6 different payments that you're making. You borrow the money to pay off the debt on all 5 of those loans.
Mm-hmm.
But then what you do is you make your loan payment smaller so that you're not squeezed so much financially. And then the next thing you know, you're either spending that extra money, not saving it, or you are out getting more debt. I don't recommend debt consolidation. It's good business for the banks, but unless you are extremely disciplined and unless you keep your payments at the same or even a higher rate, if you get a debt consolidation loan and you make the payments a little bit bigger so that you pay it off faster, that can be a benefit. But again, unless it comes down to that word that I use that nobody likes, it's called discipline. You have to discipline yourself to be able to handle your finances.
Absolutely. And that making those extra payments on whatever it is, whether it's a car loan or a consolidation loan or a credit card, makes an enormous, enormous difference.
Well, just think about it. I was just reading an article actually this morning that said that the average American on their credit card debt alone is accumulating $100 a month in interest. That's just interest. So I mean, that's money that you're paying for nothing, really, just for the use of somebody else's money. that $100 would go a long way to paying down debt if you didn't have that interest card interest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any final advice on maybe how to change our mindset on personal debt and our spending habits?
Well, the final thoughts would certainly be, if you're a Christian, follow what the Word of God says. It says in Proverbs, it says that we're supposed to plan if we want to be well
Mhm.
off. So do your planning. Don't just let things happen to you. Make things happen to your money. Instead of just kind of sitting back and accepting whatever happens, you make it happen by your determination and by your discipline.
That's right. And there is a chapter in Proverbs for every day of the month.
Absolutely. And not only that, you can manage your life by Proverbs.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Thanks so much for being with us today, Kent.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
It was our pleasure. That was Kent Prestage. He is the owner of Prestage Consulting and an instructor at Reeves College here in Lethbridge, Alberta.